is like so many things, and
I know.
yeah, it's a blessing though. It's a
That's for
blessing how we can be so far away and connected, and just be
totally.
sharing this information. Okay, it all looks good on my end, so let me just put that away. And sorry, just a moment. Almost there, I promise. You guys have always been asking me about different kind of diets that can accelerate human performance, whether it be keto, carnivore, paleo, vegan, and often, if you've known me personally, there has to be a chance that you've come up to me and asked me about something about the ketogenic diet for the past so many years. And today, I have decided to solve your confusion. Today on the show, I have a nutritionist who specializes in the ketogenic diet and exercise physiology. Her goal, everyone, is to transform people's lives and start living again. She specializes in brain neurotransmitters and how food can increase mental wellness. She's got expertise that takes her all around the world, and she talks about the ketogenic diet. She posts so many nice recipes. She's also a cook with Haley Berry and writes for Haley's website. Now, I can't tell you enough because she's just done so much. Maria Emmerich, welcome to the show.
Aw, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Did I
You know
get that
what? I
right?
would never get mad if someone mispronounced my name, but it's Maria Emmerich.
Emmerich.
That's
Okay.
okay. It's okay. That's
All right.
first world problems, right?
We'll just edit that part. No, I'm kidding.
No, I don't care. I'm serious. It's good.
All right, perfect. Welcome, Maria. And so, the ketogenic diet, everyone has so many different versions of it. Some of the people are confused every time I speak to them, and everyone's like, hey, how do you start this? And how do I get started? So that's why I wanted to like get you on the show and just have a general conversation about the ketogenic diet. Now, when you look at the reviews from Google and other search engines, then the ketogenic diet, or what is the keto diet, was one of the top searched health questions in 2018. And in 2019, it became the second top. But then you started the ketogenic lifestyle way back in the day when there was no Google, and they didn't have any search engines like that. So tell me, how did you find out about the ketogenic diet, and how long have you been doing it for?
Well, it's been 24 years now, and this was back when I was 16. I went to my family doctor because I wasn't feeling well. I was twice my size, and
Mhm.
that doctor told me I had something called PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is basically a type 2 diabetes that affects female fertility. I also was given an acid blocker for my acid reflux and an antidepressant because I was pretty severely depressed. Um, I didn't want to take those medications. And the doctor didn't really tell me why it was happening. And so I just had to do my own research. And even though there wasn't Google back then, I couldn't like search the internet. It was
Mhm.
very clear if you did any sort of, research. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is a form of diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And what causes PCOS? Excess caffeine, sugar, and carbohydrates. And at the time, I worked at a coffee shop where I would make the cinnamon rolls and the scones and the muffins, and whatever didn't sell after school, because I was still in high school then. After school, I would get to take all of those things home and eat them. So I had to really change my life, but I'm a picky eater. I don't want to eat chicken breasts and broccoli. And so I just started recreating some of my favorite recipes into low carb, sugar free, recipes that tasted really good and people really liked it.
For sure, when I look at your recipes, like all those pictures, I haven't tasted any of them, but definitely they make me want to go into the kitchen. And I'm one
I'll
of
come
those
over and
people who
cook.
don't really like cooking so much, but
Well,
it
I'll come
makes
over. I'll come over and cook.
definitely the next time you're in Dubai, we have to do this. Otherwise, I'll just take a plane and come to the US and see you.
Sounds
So
good.
we have to put that in. All right. So you create beautiful recipes like all over the place. When you started, did you have any resource? Did you have any cookbook, or this was all a part of your imagination? Were you creative as a kid?
It was just there was no cookbooks. It was just my imagination, and it was just things that I really liked. Like I grew up eating lasagna on my birthday. Okay. And
Hmm.
so that was a deal breaker. Somehow I was going to have lasagna, but without the carbs. And so I started making this protein noodle lasagna, which is easier than making regular lasagna. And you can find that recipe on my website. Go to ketomaria.com. It's free. Most of my, I try to give out free information to everybody, but the protein noodle lasagna, people go wild for it. Even people in Italy are like, how does this not have carbs? So like it was just recreating some of my favorite foods into healthier versions without the sugar or the carbs.
Interesting. And you mentioned that you faced some kind of a health challenge before you started your journey on the ketogenic diet. And most of the times when I speak to people, they have a similar story. Maybe they didn't have PCOS, but they have other kinds of issues. Maybe it was brain fog, maybe it was, pre-diabetes or something like that.
Yeah.
But then when you first began, did you think that the ketogenic diet, or do you think now that the ketogenic diet is for everyone? Do you think we're designed to be on a ketogenic diet? Because this is one of the first questions that, or one of the first comments that people who know or don't know about the ketogenic diet will start making. The vegans will be like, hey, this is not a natural way of eating. Some people will be like, you can't continue like this forever. Some people will say, oh, we've been born and we've been doing this for millions of years. I want to know your take on it.
When I started, did I know it was called the keto diet? No. Was it called that? Not really. And what is called the keto diet now, I kind of bang my head against the wall because people think they need to add butter to their coffee and add fat here and add fat there. You don't need to add fat if your goal is to lose weight. Let's make that very clear.
Mhm.
Okay. Higher ketones do not mean that you're going to burn fat better. It actually probably means the opposite. So I just want that to be very clear. What I read on the internet, what the keto diet is, I don't necessarily think that's the best way for health. So I want that to be very clear. And if you think about is the keto diet for everybody? I have not had a client not have success. But most people that come to me because they want my help are doing keto completely the wrong way. If they have autoimmune issues, if they have MS, if they have Hashimoto's, if they have Graves' disease, if they have whatever it is, they're usually doing keto the complete opposite of what I actually recommend them do. So I want that to be clear. And do I think everybody should do it? Like I said, everybody's gotten better that I worked with. So yeah, I do. And if you think about veganism, I've worked with vegans and I know how my specialty is brain neurotransmitters. When you look at serotonin, dopamine, these neurotransmitters that help you feel well, feel happy, those come from amino acids. And amino acids come from animal protein. And so every time I am working with vegans, they usually have, whether it be depression or anxiety or some sort of issue going on that way. And they're also having to eat during the day almost all the time. Every hour they're eating because their hunger is always there. If you look at our ancestral days, we wouldn't have survived. You can't spend that much time eating. And I feel that my life is so much more freeing because I can eat and be fine the rest of the day. I don't need to be constantly thinking about food. I like to go paddleboarding with the whales. So here's the thing. When I work with somebody who's a vegan or vegetarian, I ask them, is it because you love animals so much or because you think it's healthy? Because if you think it's healthy, sit down. I need to teach you some things. We're going to be here a while. But if it's because you love animals so much, I can respect that. Sit down. I'm going to show you some meal plans to eat. So I'm not a judgmental person, but I do want people to find success, and I do want them to know the truth about health, because when you think about like anti-nutrients, if you put a steak in front of someone, a plate of blueberries and a plate of kale, which one do you think has the most nutrients in it?
I'd say steak.
If the steak does. The steak blows it out of the water, and if you want to go to a whole nother level, put some organ meat on that plate.
Yep.
Okay, it's a whole nother step above. And the interesting thing that people think that I'm crazy for saying this, but the blueberries, the kale, those have a lot of anti-nutrients in them. And these anti-nutrients strip your body of what it needs to be healthy. And if you look at most of our vegetables, they were poisonous. We bred them to be delicious. Like the first tomato was found high in the Andes Mountains. It was so bitter, nobody would have ever eaten it. But we bred it to be delicious. If you look at the first watermelon, it was about this big and it was filled with seeds. Nobody would have ever eaten it, but we bred it to be really big, and now you have seedless watermelon that tastes very sweet. So I don't know. Where do you want me to go from there?
No, it's whatever you said. It just thank you for saying it. Thank you for saying it, because it's a lot of people think that eating vegetables, or they often pride themselves on eating vegetables. And you brought up anti-nutrients. It's like you can eat, and you go to a salad bar, right? Typical scenario. You go to a salad bar, and then everyone's putting in the spinach, the kale, collard greens, and everything. But what people don't realize is that these leaves, plants, vegetables, they have these enzyme inhibitors, like, which is one of the anti-nutrients, right? So you have different enzymes that are responsible for digestion of different macronutrients. So you have trypsin, chymotrypsin, you have lactase, so many things. And then a lot of people would pay extra money to put in the chicken breast or the salmon on top of it. But guess what? You're not really absorbing any of the protein, or like some of the protein, at least partially, from those big, expensive salad boards, because they have those kind of anti-nutrients. And I like the fact that you mentioned about tomatoes and watermelons and how we have bred them. The reality is, plants have, and I want everyone to know this, that plants have been on this planet for longer than humans. They have been here for more than 500 million years. And the reason why they have survived is because they have developed these protective mechanisms inside of them that did not allow a predator to eat it and to leave them alone. So technically, a predator or a bug or whatever would just come and try to eat this plant, and this plant would be so poisonous, or like they would just upset their tummy. And next guess what, next day the entire herd of those predators don't come there, and they leave the plant alone. And this is why the plant survives from all these factors. And now what we do is, I mean, I guess some plants, some vegetables are okay, but then you look at the majority of the ones, especially with GMO and glyphosate and all these plants that are being sprayed with all these pesticides, and they're full of lectins, phytates, phytic acid, oxalic acid, like the list goes on and on. So I'm glad that you brought it up there. And thinking about if we were designed to be this way or not, well, it's worked in evolution a lot. Babies, when they're born, they're in some sort of a ketogenic state, because the mother's milk is made out of at least 50 to 60% fat, and the cholesterol in the breast milk by itself is maybe 5 to 6 times more than what an adult needs. So there is this diet pathway that you don't even start using carbohydrates until you start growing up, and then you've got the orange juice and like things like that. And then, and you mentioned ketones. So I'm sure you and me know this, but a lot of people think about the ketogenic diet, and they think about ketones as one simple or complex thing. But in reality, there are different types of ketones. So tell us something about like which type of ketones are there, and like probably how do you measure ketones, because that's a big confusion.
So a lot of people, they think that, I'm gonna test my urine with these urine strips to see if I'm in ketosis. And it will work for like the first 2 weeks, but then they get depressed. Like, I'm eating the same thing. Why am I no longer in ketosis? It's like
Yeah.
urine strips only tell you if you're hydrated. They can't test beta hydroxybutyrate. And beta hydroxybutyrate is the actual blood ketone that you want to test, but you have to test it with your blood. Am I in ketosis? Yes, I eat maybe 10 carbs a day, total carbs. Don't get caught up in counting net carbs. That will cause you to fail. But I also work out in a fasted state. So I'm using ketones for that energy. Okay. I run marathons fasted. I'm using that ketones for the energy. So when I test my blood ketones, they're very low. It doesn't mean that I'm not burning fat, because I just use the ketones for my energy. Now, if I would drink a cup of butter, not that I recommend this, my ketones would go very high. Does it mean I'm burning fat? No, because I just stored a bunch of fat. Okay. It just means I have a bunch of ketones in my bloodstream that I'm not using. It's not necessarily a good thing. So if you're an athlete, don't get depressed if you're testing your blood ketones and they're only like 0.3. If you're not, 3.0 or 4.0, you're like, yeah, I want really high ketones. That doesn't mean that you're burning fat. And let's be truthful, 90% of people that try the keto diet want to lose weight, whether it be 100 pounds or 10 pounds. That's what they kind of come here for. It's great for so many things. It's great for brain cognition, everything, but don't. And another thing, so I've been doing it for 24 years. My ketones are also low. If you look at the Inuits that were in ketosis, their ketones will go lower the longer that they've been keto. So that's another reason. The longer you've been keto, you might see lower ketones. That doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a badge of honor that the person with the highest ketone
No.
level is been doing the ketogenic diet properly, guys. It doesn't work that way. They're like Maria said, you can use those. I wouldn't call them cheap. I mean, they're kind of cheap, but those urine strips, you can use those. But the thing is, they work in the beginning because they only measure a certain kind of ketone called acetoacetate. You have all these breath meters that can measure your acetone levels. But as Maria mentioned, the gold standard way to measure your ketones would be by pricking your blood, pricking your finger and getting a drop of blood in which you measure beta hydroxybutyrate. And I'm really hoping there comes a point where, how we have continuous blood glucose monitors,
Yes.
then we can have like continuous ketone monitors. And I really like the fact that you're out there and you're telling people that, hey, listen, higher ketones isn't going to do any good, because the reason why you probably have higher ketones is because you have an inability to use them in your cells for energy. Like Maria, she goes for a marathon, and going for a marathon and working out fasted just takes a lot of energy. So imagine if you have high ketones at that point. That means, I mean, you will have high ketones in the beginning when you're starting, because your body doesn't really know how to use it. They're just floating
Exactly.
around. They're just
Yeah.
floating around. So don't fall into what the keto bros are telling you all around the world. And it's not the highest. Your ketone levels don't matter. Like, even in some scientific research, 0.5 millimoles per deciliter to zero point 0.8 is good enough. Like, you don't have to go even to 1.
Do you have this in India? Do you have these fake ketone drinks or no?
Well, in India, no, but I have come across, or I have used in my journey, I've used ketone salts and ketone esters and these exogenous ketones.
Okay, exogenous ketones. That's what I'm getting at, because that's very popular in the US, and people
Mhm.
think, oh, I need to drink that to be in ketosis in order to lose weight. And the truth is, that just means that you won't use your own body fat to make ketones, because you're using that crutch.
Mhm.
You're using that to make ketones rather than your body fat. And what's interesting is when I did try them to experiment with them, I gained weight on them. And it
Wow,
just shows
interesting.
how, I mean, I just don't want people to think that they need that, waste their money on something that's going to give them this false hope.
Mhm. I mean, when you use it, you do get a bit of boost in cognition. That's what I've experienced because I've only used it in circumstances when I was doing a competition, or whether I was like super sleep deprived and I just caffeine wasn't working at that point, so I just took in some ketone salts, which are ketones which are bonded to salts such as magnesium, potassium, and sodium. And yeah, I completely agree because if you want to get higher ketones, just follow the ketogenic diet or fast for some time, or use something else. But exogenous ketones, they can be powerful in my opinion when it's used right, but it's not something that you use every day. There's also a lot of repercussions of using exogenous ketones when it comes to liver health, because the liver doesn't really let's say turn them around in a certain way. And I like that we're mentioning so many things about energy, because at the end of the day, energy is a key to it all, right? In my opinion, I feel like if you have more energy, you're a better person, you're a better athlete, if you're working on a computer all day long, you're more productive. You can
Yeah.
just get so much out. And the ketogenic diet has also been around. I mean, it's been around for so many years, but I think the first papers on the ketogenic diet came around 100 years ago, and they were examining how the effects of carbohydrate and ketones when it comes to energy. And I want everyone to know that when you think about like your carbs are your main energy source, think about it. Your carbohydrates can be stored either in your liver or your muscle, or both of them together. But then if you top off the glycogen stores and the muscle glycogen stores, you have about, let's say, 2,000 calories, something give or take. But then when you look at body fat as an energy source, then even if you're like super low in body fat, let's say you're like 7% body fat, that would give you like more than 25,000 calories. And this is why we're talking about energy and how Maria can run that marathon, because she's using her own body fat, her own energy. We spoke about exogenous, sorry, which is outside the body, but this way she's using endogenous, which the body uses by itself. And also, one thing which was surprising to me was like when you even compare ketone per molecule with carbohydrates, then ketones can produce more than 25%, like more energy in your cells. So think about this. We've got like so many cells, millions, no, trillions. Yeah, we've got trillions of cells. And then if you want to use the ketones to provide energy through those cells, like imagine your muscle cells, you can lift 25% more weight, or your immune cells can be 25% strong, and your brain cells, you can be 25% happier. And I would think that that's a good impact for the ketogenic diet.
Totally. You're totally right. And this is why when I do run marathons at mile 20, they have this wall up. Usually marathons, they'll have the wall at mile 20 because that's when your body should be shutting down. But that's because most people are carb loading for their marathons. And what's interesting is I run right by that wall and I'm just fine.
Have you tried to use carbs as well in your marathon strategy? Because I've recently looked at some research which says that if you have glucose, well, you have to be in a ketogenic diet for a good period of time and you have to be fat adapted. But then if you introduce glucose before a race and then you simultaneously have elevated levels of ketones as well as glucose and glycogen, then chances are your performance just improves a big time.
I'm
Have you
actually going to tell you
experimented?
that nope. In my situation, when I do add in carbohydrates, my energy tanks. It's as if someone is trying to do the keto diet in the beginning. You know how their energy gets low because their body doesn't know what to do with it. If I even add in a small amount, like say 20 grams of carbs or whatever, my energy goes down so bad to the point where I almost went to the doctor. I thought I was getting sick. But no, it was just because I was eating too many carbohydrates. And then when I went back to my regular diet, my energy went right back up. So I don't know if it was just been because I've been doing it so long. What most experts have told me, it's just because that's what my body and cells know how to use. And when you add in those carbohydrates, it's just like going through the keto flu, but you're opposite.
How many grams of carbohydrates did you add, or were you adding?
20.
20. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Just 20 grams. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's that. And for
It
people
was
who
in
are
a
listening,
form of, yeah, it's okay.
20 grams, like just think about a banana. That's like 26 grams of carbohydrates. An apple might be like 30 grams of carbohydrates. So she's saying that she's
That's what it
used
was.
20
It was
grams.
fruit. It was fruit. It was fruit to give me that instant energy. And it didn't give me instant energy. It gave me an instant energy tank. And that I did it for about like 3 days. And as soon as I stopped, that following day, my energy went right back up.
Have you experimented with continuous blood glucose monitors? Do you
Yes, I
see?
have.
Yeah.
And I'm the opposite there too. My son and I have 2 boys. They're 10 and 11. And we were both, we were wearing CGMs. And my kids have been keto since I've adopted them. And we're the opposite. So when we eat, our blood sugars go down. That's when you'll see our lowest blood sugars almost. In the middle of the night, they're even lower. But let's get this clear. Our blood sugars are pretty even all day, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're not like most people's that are eating carbs are up and down and up and down. It's pretty even. But when we do eat, there's a slight tick down. And our highest readings are when we're exercising. So my 11-year-old went on a run with me, and our highest glucose readings were when we were running.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we would eat, it would go down. But for the majority of people, when they would run, their glucose would go down. And when they would eat, it would go back up.
Mm-hmm. I think that is also because of the cortisol response. So probably when you're running fasted or you're running with, let's say, less energy in your tank, it elevates cortisol, and when cortisol is elevated, it can also increase some glucose in the body, just so you get more energy.
Well,
And
you need glucose, right? But when your brain needs it, but you can
yeah.
make it for protein and stuff. Your thyroid needs it, but you can make it for protein. And so when it does go elevated, it's just circulating because I'm not using it, right? So
Let's talk about that. You mentioned that your body can make. I mean, your brain cells especially need some type of glucose, but your body is able to make it in a process called gluconeogenesis. So tell us about gluconeogenesis and what that is and what that does for someone who can't wrap their heads around this.
Okay, so I really don't like talking about it because people get afraid of eating protein and they think that too much protein turns into sugar. And it's a bad thing. And so they limit their protein, and then they lose their hair, and they're like, Maria, I'm losing my hair.
Well,
I'm
don't
like,
the vegans tell you the same thing? We're losing our hairs, we're losing our nails.
yes,
Health.
they need to get their protein in, right? And protein is going to give you that beautiful hair, your thyroid health, all of that type of stuff is, you need amino acids.
Well, I can say something to change their mind. Well, it's not only protein, it's also lactate and the backbone of glycerol that elevates gluconeogenesis. Right. But don't be scared of protein.
I know, right? So don't be afraid of protein. But, at some point that protein is going to give you what you need for your thyroid health and your hair health and all of these things. I find it people get stuck in a rut when they do fat bombs or fat fasts where they don't really eat any protein. They're just eating like fat. I don't know if you've heard of that, where it's kind of popular here, or it was. They would do like an egg fast or a fat fast where all they would eat is fat, because fat raises insulin the least. And people get really afraid of their insulin rising, which it's not a bad thing, So they limit their protein. They only eat fat, and they end up losing muscle mass. They end up losing their hair. And it's just another one of those bad keto things to do.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that is typically being advised to people who are using the ketogenic diet to treat seizures or epilepsy, because that is a very strict ketogenic diet. Even in a very strict ketogenic diet, I think you're allowed up to about 15%.
Yeah, I work with a lot of families that have children with epilepsy or seizures, and even adults too that have epilepsy or seizures. And I used to also believe that in that case, higher ketones did matter. But I've been doing protein sparing modified fasts. And that's where you lower the fat, increase the protein, and keep carbohydrates close to zero.
Mhm.
And in some cases, they actually get better doing protein sparing modified fast. And in that case, they do not have higher ketones.
Mhm. I would say that this whole effect also comes from insulating the myelin sheaths in the brain. So the brain has this network of, I mean, your neurons are wrapped around these sheets of fat called myelin sheaths, and they facilitate communication or better communication across neurons. And I think increasing the fat would the way people from epilepsy and seizures do see a difference. It is, yes, because of ketones a little bit, but it's mostly because of insulating those myelin sheaths, or probably because there is a lot of mitochondria in the hippocampus. And then it could be that those mitochondria are, and we know for a fact that mitochondria can build more energy from fat. So it could be that, but I agree with you. Protein is so
Protein is,
important.
the thing is that's where the nutrients are.
Mhm.
So let's be clear. We want to eat the most nutrient dense foods to fuel our body properly. And if you just eat a stick of butter, you're getting close to zero nutrients. Well, I to get some vitamin A, whoop-de-doo. But if you ate, some steak, even a lean steak, like a tenderloin, it's going to have all of those vitamins and minerals that you want and need to keep your body happy and healthy, you
Mhm.
know?
I completely agree. Excessive consumption of fat are not going to get people anywhere, and this is why one of the reasons why people often on a ketogenic diet hit a plateau, because they're just overfeeding themselves with fat, and then at the end of the day, like, those calories do matter,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
will manifest in a certain way. In this
But
case,
you'll
like,
also see like higher glucose in the morning when you overfeed your body.
mhm,
It's like overfueling your car tank. If you're overfueling it, you're going to see higher glucose the next morning. So lowering the fat the previous day will help with that. But I also want to talk about the whole myelin sheath.
mhm.
I don't know if you have this problem in India, but we're eating a lot of vegetable oils like soybean oil,
Oh yeah.
cottonseed oil, canola oil, and that's actually making our cellular walls damaged.
Mhm.
And so is it really that we need a lot of fat, or that we just need to heal our bodies and keep all the bad fats out of our diet so we don't get those diseases? I think that's a huge point that we're not really talking about in the community.
I would completely agree. These seed oils and these omega-6 fatty acids, which you get from, again, highly processed seed oils, they're not they're not even native, right? Because these are things which biology hasn't evolved to understand. So you take canola oil, which is again GMO, or soybean oil, or corn oil, or peanut oil, and then you take them to a factory, and then you put some, God knows, I don't even know the process, but then you heat them to high degrees, and then you cool them and you hydrogenate them, and then when it enters our body really doesn't know how to use them,
Mhm.
because we haven't developed the because it's never been found in nature. All these
Right.
oils, like, these are found in plants, but then it's not found in so much of volume with so many things added to it. So what happens is, it's cheap to produce it. Yeah, it's like a commodity product, and it travels everywhere. And I completely agree with the fact that it is not just the fat, it is the right kind of fat that
Mhm.
you want to take in. So you want to take in more omega 3s with a higher EPA and DHA, and which will actually help your cells and neurons. Butter could be a great example, coconut oil, grass fed ghee, things like that. So I completely agree with you on that part.
But I
And
think, like, I wrote about it on my website about, the biggest keto mistake. You can eat a lot of those, zero carb fats like mayo and salad dressings, like ranch dressing. Everybody loves that. Like all of these bottled dressings and like mayonnaise and stuff that a lot of people are smothering on their foods are just keeping them away from their goals of health and weight loss and healing because they're filled with those harmful oils.
there's a word for it. It's called dirty keto.
Ah, dirty keto. You know what's so
Dirty
funny?
keto.
I had a woman who lost 250 pounds, and they featured her on the cover of Women's World magazine. And they talked about me, which was cool in the magazine. But on the cover, it said, Twyla lost 250 pounds on ultra keto. And I'm like, ultra keto? She's just eating real food, But that's what they call it now, ultra keto, because there's no process. She actually had to cook her food, I guess.
Mhm. And this is what happens when a lot of people they transition into the ketogenic diet, and then you have. I mean, I wouldn't blame social media for it, but then there are people in the world who probably get away with certain things, and they always post that they're having these big burgers with mayonnaise and like all those ranch and things like that. And what people start thinking is that is okay. It shows a higher fat value, so let me have that, and then they do lose some weight, but they seriously damage their health because of
Yeah.
the same points that we said, that
Yep.
your cell membranes are compromised, and then
Yep.
it takes so long for your body to rebuild all of that. So
Mhm.
I
I
think,
actually think that's worse than sugar or carbohydrates in my
yes,
mind.
because I would even say that sugar or carbohydrates could get you a inflammation response. But then if you're having sugar and you take the stairs, you can neutralize that blood glucose spike. If you're
Right.
having like carbohydrates and you go for a postprandial walk, then that is also shown to
Right.
activate your muscles, and you bring the glucose down. But then when you use these harmful, dangerous fats, or all these products that are ultra processed
Mhm.
and come in with a hell lot of toxins and things that we don't want from plastics and all these other nasty things, then your cell membranes, like it takes you so long, and there is not a diet that you can do for that. You just have to replace them, and then they will damage the epithelial walls of the cells. It just brings so many things. So guys, if you're listening to this, stick to what nature has given us.
Mhm.
Just try to think like, did this thing come from a factory, or did this thing exist like 300 years ago? Like, is it a part of nature, or is it
Well,
just part of something else?
we don't eat anything from a package. I mean, it's real food, nothing from a package. It's important.
hmm I'm getting there. I think I might have like a few things to swap, but like I'm getting there.
There's no judging, I mean, the reason why I was so sick and overweight is because I lived off of all that stuff. So there's no
hmm
judging. I think that everybody's diet evolves. I didn't go right to eating ultra keto or whatever. It was a process, and what our diet looks like 5 years from now, like we're all evolving, we're all getting better. And that's how I look at things. Like I'm always making new health goals because I do want to just keep evolving.
What's your current health goal?
Um, I used to teach yoga, and that was probably, I don't know, 20 years ago. And my goal is to get back into it because it just like helped my mind a lot. I guess I'm always working that I have a hard time finding time to fit that in, but I know that it's important. So, that's my goal now.
Interesting. My goal this year is to, in the beginning of the year, it was to do more yoga. I actually went to the birthplace of yoga in
You did?
India. Yeah, it's called Rishikesh. So I went there. I was traveling around India to a few of these top energy hotspots, and I wanted to see like the kind of vibration that is there, how people living, if it calms my nervous system down. So it was like an experiment. It was like a very touristic experiment, and yeah, I spoke to some people who've been doing yoga for like years and years, and then I was all excited. Came back to Dubai, get onto the daily things, and then but I will definitely find time for yoga, and I want to push my meditation for at least an hour,
Oh man,
3 days a week at least. So
that's my
that's my
hardest
health
thing.
goal. I
That's
mean, it's good to do it for some time. I mean, it's easy to do it for some time, but then it gets challenging.
Does movement meditation work? Because I feel like I meditate when I'm actually running, but I'm
Mhm.
not sitting still. I'm moving, but I don't sit still very well. So that's why I wondered if can meditation work if I'm moving?
Well, when you're moving, you definitely get those runner's high, and you get into the state of flow where
Yeah.
things are just I mean, it's just, I cannot even explain the state of flow to anyone, but it's that thing that when you're running or you're engrossed in something that you really love, and a state where your mind goes, where time just goes by and you don't even feel it. But
Yeah.
with meditation, I think I mean, it also depends what kind of benefits are you looking for, right? Because with some data that we've seen in meditation, it's like you need to just switch everything off and like be in that traditional thing.
Yeah.
But that's only for, activating more gray matter in the brain and just changing your brainwave frequency, and probably just recovering from any past traumas, or like getting more clarity. A lot of people use it to kind of solve things. They get into a different timeline, all sorts of stuff. But I think movement meditation is great. A lot of people advocate for it,
Okay.
but if it
I didn't know if
doesn't
it
bring you
counted.
all the yeah, it doesn't bring you all the benefits.
Okay.
You mentioned something else as well in our conversation, which was the keto flu. Now,
Mhm.
a lot of people might not be familiar with this word, but they will be familiar with how it feels, because a lot of people have told me that, I'm starting the ketogenic diet, and, they're all happy and excited. And I'm like, hey, listen, you have got to go to this. And they're like, yeah, my willpower is super strong. And I'm like, your willpower will be crushed,
Yeah.
when you first start. And one of the reasons why that happens is the keto flu. So tell us about keto flu, what it is, and what are your hacks around it?
So the keto flu, I actually like to call the carb withdrawal, because
Hmm.
I don't want to blame it on ketones. I want to blame it on the carbs, because the carbs
Hmm.
made you be this. So this carb withdrawal, you'll get rid of all of the carbohydrates,
Hmm.
and your energy is going to tank. You'll have heavy legs walking upstairs. You might cry easy. Your moods will be very bad. And it's not because carbs make serotonin. Let's make that very clear. What carbs do is they retain water. And when you eliminate carbohydrates, along goes a lot of water loss. And with that water loss goes a lot of electrolytes. So you can easily correct this keto flu, carb withdrawal, with getting enough salt and getting enough electrolytes. And by doing that, your carb withdrawal will be a lot less worse. Some people don't feel it at all if they do it enough. But when you are so dehydrated, this can cause depression. This will cause your energy to tank. This can cause constipation. It's not that you need fiber to go number 2. You don't. But you
Hmm.
do need hydration. That colon needs salt. You can't just drink more water when you do keto, because you're just going to urinate all the time. You need more salt. And if you think about this whole ultra keto diet, packaged foods are filled with sodium. They have so much sodium in desserts and breads and pastas and rice. They're filled with sodium. And so when you get rid of all of those things and you're looking at eggs, eggs don't have any sodium in them. And we've been told to fear salt. And so when we do finally make our eggs, we put very little on. Or when we make our steak, we put very little on. And so you're probably not getting near enough salt in a day when you're eating eggs and steak and chicken and things that don't have sodium. And so I tell people, if you set aside 2.5 teaspoons of salt by your cooking vessel, if you don't use that in a day, add it to your water. And then, being very cognizant, if you eat enough protein, you should get enough potassium. But if you don't, you might want to think about doing some sort of electrolyte that way. And also magnesium and zinc are very important. And so is it that you need, if you're, like people are like, so if this is the perfect diet, why do I need to do supplements? Here's the thing. Everybody's very deficient in magnesium because it used to be in our water supply. But now we're drinking bottled water, filtered water. Even I live on a well, and our well water doesn't have magnesium because the soil's so depleted of it. And so it's not just people on keto that are deficient in magnesium. Everybody is. Okay. And it's not that keto causes deficiencies in sodium. It's that we're just so afraid of salt. And most packaged foods are filled with sodium. So you're going from 200 milligrams, 2,000 milligrams of sodium in a day to very little. That's going to be a shock to your system, as well as you don't have the carbohydrates to retain it. So you just need to add more salt in. Make
Hmm.
sense?
Yes, it does completely, and I couldn't agree more. We've been demonizing salt for the longest period of time, and we've been many countries have thought that salt increases blood pressure and can increase the rate of cardiovascular diseases, but the reality is it doesn't. Sodium
No.
chloride by itself might elevate your blood pressure a little bit, but it is because it is in absence of other minerals. You mentioned potassium, which is very important. You mentioned magnesium, and I couldn't agree more that I would even go as far as saying that 80% of the people around the world are deficient in magnesium. And when you think of magnesium, or when you think of sodium, or you think of potassium, chloride, zinc, all of these are a group, a class called minerals. And what minerals do, especially when we come up to magnesium, magnesium by itself is involved in the enzymatic processes, like over 300 enzymatic processes and over 900 gene protein reactions. So just having less magnesium in your diet, you're depleting your body of all those 300 plus enzymatic processes. And then also, I would go for as far as saying that yes, electrolytes are important, but if you have if you can somehow find like a mineral rich salt which is not contaminated by microplastics, or hasn't been taken out from the caves with a lot of pollution or something like that, then you can increase your overall mineral status. And when you increase overall mineral status, your cells get more energy. The cells that produce ATP, which is the energy currency of your body, require minerals and require enzymatic reactions to do that. So, your detox pathways, so many of your detox pathways like glutathione, your hormones, your adrenals, all of these require sufficient amount of minerals. Like, let's say your T3, T4, they require iodine and selenium. And without iodine and selenium, you might have a very hard time either gaining weight or losing weight. So I
Mhm.
like that you mentioned that. And I would even sometimes put a high quality sea salt in my coffee, like just a pinch. And, just because we know that beverages like coffee and tea also deplete your body of the minerals. So I couldn't agree more with you. Your ketosis reduces your body's ability to hold on to water, and because you pee everything out, you lose minerals, and then you add more water, and then you pee that out, and then you lose more minerals. So this is like a vicious cycle. So I mean, have decent amount of water and make sure you're replenishing yourself with minerals, because most of the mineral bottles of water, after filtering or reverse osmosis or whatever processes, they lose out on a lot of minerals. So even if you have like a good water filter, make sure that you add some minerals.
Mhm.
What's your thoughts on medium chain triglycerides, which is like a very highly popular word in the ketogenic community?
I think it's a highly processed oil that has less nutrients than sugar does.
Okay, you're the first one who's telling me that. Tell me more.
I have charts on, like we demonize sugar because it's like this empty calorie. There's actually nutrients in it, where MCT oil is really empty calorie because there's no nutrients in it. You do not need MCT oil for a ketogenic diet. And it often causes upset stomach. It causes diarrhea. It causes, I don't know. I think it's just so people think that they need to buy all of this stuff in order to be in
Mhm.
ketosis. Do I use MCT oil? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Um, it's another form of getting exogenous ketones, like you said, the external form of
Hmm.
ketones. Yeah, do people think that it's great for energy, this and that, but try it. It's probably going to give you diarrhea and an upset stomach.
Hmm. Yeah, you
And it's a
will.
processed oil. It's a very highly processed oil. Exactly what we were talking about earlier. The
If
processed
you, yeah, if you go overboard and you use it like your olive oil on a salad, then
fat.
you're going to have this. You're going to be in the toilet for a very long time. Take that from me. I've tried
Replace
it.
it, replace it with like protein. Replace it
Hmm.
with protein, and you'll be better off. with the
Hmm.
nutrients and with your body composition.
Hmm. What about fiber? What do you think fiber does,
Well,
and what's your take on fiber?
fiber is like steel wool to the intestines.
Hmm.
You don't need fiber to go number two. Just think about newborn babies. They poo all the time and they don't eat any fiber.
Hmm.
But we get addicted to fiber. It's causing like an irritant to the intestines. And if I work with a lot of people that have diverticulitis, Crohn's, or colitis, and what
Hmm.
does a doctor tell them? Eliminate all the fiber, right? Because that is causing so much damage. What I'm telling all of you, eliminate the fiber before it causes all of this damage.
Hmm.
Um, it causes a lot of bloating. It actually causes more constipation because it causes bulk to the stools. You don't need it for good gut health. Something like collagen or like the tissues of meat are a much better form of like a prebiotic fiber. Um, for like what am I trying? A prebiotic, not a fiber.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's totally overrated. I wrote a carnivore cookbook, and doing a lot of research about that. It's unneeded. It causes a lot of gas and bloating. If you don't want to have, if you're going on a date and you don't want to have gas, don't eat the fiber, right?
Hmm.
Get a steak.
Do you, and also when we classify fibers, then we have insoluble fiber and soluble fiber. Are you saying both of them are equally as bad, or insoluble ones, the one that sits in our gut and ferments, and then our gut bacteria can use it to feed themselves, like the prebiotic fiber you mentioned? Do they have a role?
I'm saying that they both are unneeded. That's what I'm saying. Um, like my husband eats 100% carnivore, and he's
Mhm.
never been healthier. I ate carnivore. I've added in plants. Like you said, if you like onions and garlic, you just can't replace that with anything. You need some flavor, right?
You need some taste in
Um,
your life.
I know, but it's not needed. So I just want that to be clear. Neither insoluble or soluble fiber is not needed for gut health or going number two or any of that.
Hmm. What's your take on, or have you put any of your clients on either a cyclical keto diet or a targeted keto diet, or any other ultra keto diet you mentioned, but
Uh,
anything else?
I use protein sparing modified fast with my clients, but cyclical keto, I'll just say that you will lose more muscle mass. It's been proven if you do like this, carb cycling or like carb loading, anything like that with the ketogenic diet, you will lose muscle mass because your body's just not sure which it's using for fuel. And I will say that a lot of people end up falling off the wagon when they do that because even a sweet potato will cause their sugar cravings. Let's be honest, a lot of people have a lot of food addiction, and getting rid of the sugar and the carbohydrates helps free them from those carb addiction. And when they start sneaking it back in, even in like a controlled type of a diet, they fall off the wagon, and it takes a really long time to get back on. So no, there's no need to. It's not. You'll just end up losing muscle mass.
Hmm. Do you see any hormonal changes when people go on keto long term?
Yeah, it actually helps normalize their cycles. I do keto coaching. I have like basically a keto college,
Hmm.
and one of my students is 60 years old, and her cycle came back, and she was like, "Damn it, I
Wow.
didn't know my cycle." But I was like, "This is good. This means longevity. This is keeping you youthful, right?" So yeah, I mean, I had a woman who, one of my coaches, almost 50 years old, and she had a baby. So, like, you just have to be aware that you're much more fertile on the keto carnivore diet.
Hmm. And what about, you spoke about muscle loss, but can you build muscle on a ketogenic diet? Because
Oh, yeah.
traditionally, the way muscle building has been recognized is, yeah, you have a lot of growth factors, but you also need insulin, which comes from a heavy carbohydrate load, to shuttle protein into the muscle, and then maybe increase more muscle protein synthesis. Actually, I don't agree to that. I don't think carbohydrates can increase muscle protein synthesis, but they can allow for the protein to get into the cells easier. What's your take on that?
You can certainly build a lot of muscle on a ketogenic diet. Just look at, there's a whole group called Keto Gains, and they're bodybuilders. They're huge, and they eat, zero carbs. You don't need that. And you can use other sorts of food to shuttle, the protein into the cells faster. Something like whey protein would do that, but you can do it on pure animal protein. That's all
Hmm.
needed. Like, look at Sean Baker. Like, he's a huge carnivore. He eats nothing but meat, and he's massive.
He's going to be on the podcast soon.
Oh, good.
We're just
Tell him I'll
talking.
give him a shout out.
For sure, I'll do that. And what's your take on sweeteners? Because a lot of, I mean, the ketogenic, one of the best things I think that happened on the ketogenic diet, because when I used to first be on it, I was just so strict, and there weren't these companies coming out with all the great things. And my story, I don't really like to cook, so I was just eating, just some fat and like a little bit of vegetables and some protein, and then I got introduced to all these companies which had all these, then now there were keto cereals, and then there were keto
Oh,
bars and keto chocolates. And I was like, in the beginning, I was just like, wow, this is going to change my life. And then I realized that, it's got a lot of sweeteners and things like that. So what's your take on sweeteners? Good, bad, special ones?
there are certain ones that will not affect insulin. They'll not affect your blood sugar, but you have to be careful. Like stevia, it's great, but a lot of times they bulk it with maltodextrin, which is a
Hmm.
corn derivative. Or like those products will use inulin fiber, which is a type of sweetener, a tapioca fiber. Like those types of things are not recommended. I'm very clear about which ones will not increase blood sugar or insulin levels and that are safe. And I do use them. And that, I think that's what helped me stay on the diet for 24 years. And I also have 10 and 11-year-old that eat this way. And we make gummy bears and we make things because I think food can be pleasurable. I think there's a fine line to making it your life and making it somewhat enjoyable. I think you should enjoy it. And so they're safe ones, but you have to be aware of which ones.
So which ones are safe?
I
It
wrote a
says,
whole, you know what? I wrote a whole blog post on mariamindbodyhealth.com
okay.
about it, but
So anyone who's listening, go to the website and then you'll get to know. I okay, perfect. And then so we spoke about exogenous ketones, which might be a good way to hack ketones, but it's not recommended. We spoke about the ketogenic diet. Are there any other ways to induce the state of ketosis in the body? Have you looked at some other biohacks or some other things that surprisingly elevate ketone levels
if
apart
you,
from butter?
if you fast long enough, that will raise ketones, but you'll also eventually lose muscle mass. So I'm not a big fan of extended fasting for that reason. Also being, I'm an athlete and stuff like that. And I enjoy to eat. So I don't, but extended fasting would do that. I mean, as long as you keep the carbohydrates low enough, you will be in ketosis.
Do you have a personal fasting practice?
Um, Fasting was like intermittent fasting was hard for me because I,
You're
grew
so
up on,
active.
well, I grew up on a standard American diet where I don't think I was necessarily hungry, but my mind thought that I was. It was just the habit of eating every so often. And so now it's very easy. I practice like a 16-8. I I don't force it. It just happens. I don't wake up hungry. So I don't eat until after I run. So
Okay, perfect. And this conversation has just been so fantastic. We covered so many great points, and thank you so much for all the wisdom that you've shared with us. And now, for my last question to you today, if you had access to a time machine, now let's put on imaginary hats and then think that you have an access to a time machine, and you could rewind back time and you could go back to your younger self when you were like 20, maybe your 20s. What would be that one, or you can give yourself more pieces of advice that you would give yourself, knowing all that you know right now? But this doesn't have to be on the ketogenic diet or health, or it could be on anything.
oh wow. Um so much of my life has been like unpredictable. Like I was a planner, and I probably would tell myself that it's all going to be okay. I know that's kind of vague, but my whole life has been absolutely the opposite of what I thought it would be, but it's so much better. So if I would have planned it, it wouldn't have been as cool.
Hmm. And a lot of people, thank you for saying that. And a lot of people often, including myself, think that we're normally in control of all the circumstances because we're smart, and we're either fast or smart, or we've got everything right, and all the calculations would lead to that precise moment. But the reality is, from the grain of sand in the desert to the tidal waves to the way the moon changes, things are mysterious in this world, and things are not in control, and we can only understand a piece of whatever is
Yeah.
going on, but that doesn't mean that we understand really what's going on. We believe we know what's going on, and that knowing something in and out tells us that we're like in control of it, but the reality is there is no control. And the time you give up on control and you take a step back and you be like, hey, I'm gonna let go and let's see how this goes,
Yep.
for normally, like, I would see magic happen. But the
Yep.
thing is, we're always in this cycle of like, oh, you know what, I'm going to do this and this will lead to this. And then our monkey mind keeps jumping from like one thought to the other thought to the other thought. So I'm completely with you there. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's really needed these days. I've had such a mindset as well. And now I'm like taking your advice. And I'm sure the listeners are taking your advice. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And Maria, thank you so much for today. This has been lovely. Thank you so much for all the work you've done, all the lives you've touched, and all the people that you've helped healing. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
If they go to ketomaria.com, they'll find me on YouTube. They'll find my website. They'll find my free recipes. They'll find everything there. Just ketomaria.com.
And they'll find that blog post too.
They will. They will. Thank you
Amazing.
so much.
It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And you take care of yourself.
You
And
too.
everybody, take care of yourself. This is CJ signing out from shiftwithcj.com. Everyone, have an energetic day ahead of